everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Greek AF Radio podcast. Today, we have a very special episode. We are actually very excited because we were kind of drawn back to our school days when we were doing some fun and interesting reads. Some people may say you were forced to read, but as a Greek, and I'm sure my co-host Foti agrees, these stories, they fill us with pride. They fill us with the knowledge that, there was so much in our history, so much out there. And we have an amazing guest that takes everything I just said and kind of takes it to the next level. So without further ado, let me introduce my co-host, Foti Stamos. Hello, Foti.
So Ari, thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm also excited and honored because the readings that we're talking about also have some deep meanings about life in general. Mm-hmm. And, we live by some of these experiences that are from the great works of our guests that we're going to introduce in a moment. But again, super excited. We always have this great lineup of mixing up the variety of our guests in our shows. And this is very fitting for us in this episode. So without further ado, let's invite our guest, acclaimed and honored author Tad Crawford. Thank you so much for joining us on this special episode with you. It's super exciting to have you with us. The works that you've done is amazing, and this is a great opportunity to discuss what put this together for you to publish these great books.
Well, you know what? Before he answers that, Tad, if you would just give us a brief little summary of your life, like where you grew up, what you studied, what kind of led you to the author path, if we could.
Oh, of course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Ari and Foti. I grew up in the artist colony of Woodstock, New York. My father was a poet. My brother was a novelist, my older brother. And writing was always something that fascinated me. And I studied and wrote from my teenage years. Oh, wow. And despite that, I went to law school and then used the law as an instrument to help creative people, wrote a lot of books like Legal Guide for the Visual Artist and related books, and taught at the School of Visual Arts. Wow. And continued to do my own fiction writing. And at some point, I had a dream. And in the dream, my father was a wounded Greek youth. He had been wounded in the ankle. And I picked him up and carried him down into a necropolis, a city of the dead. And as I carried him further and further, he became lighter and lighter. Mm-hmm. So at the bottom of this journey downward, there was a hermaphroditic figure that had a bowl of liquid. And I'm not sure whether my father drank from the liquid or not. So it was that dream that inspired research, going back to the Iliad and Odyssey, researching many, many Greek myths, and ultimately led to a novel about Telemachus and Odysseus. Odysseus being the paramount absent father, absent from the time his son was a baby of a few months until the boy was 20.
Wow, that's actually like very interesting. I didn't know this story before. Now we haven't really discussed what led you to it, but that dream is very, very interesting. It's one of those things where I'm curious as to what was going on in your psyche that kind of drew this out. But it's interesting.
I would think that in my psyche, there was a question about my relationship to my father. Mm-hmm. And my parents had divorced when I was 7. Mm-hmm. And I lived with my mother, not my father. So the question of the absent father was always an issue for me. And as I know it is for so many men and people in general. And this was a way to explore it. Also, in the image of the dream of the wound of the Greek youth wounded in the ankle, it immediately brought Achilles to mind.
Achilles, yeah.
And of course, once you start thinking about Achilles, you're in the Iliad. And once you're in the Iliad, you're in the Odyssey. And then as I researched more and more and was kind of inspired more and more, I realized that there was a much larger body of myth from which the Odyssey and the Iliad had both been drawn, and learned that in antiquity there had been 6 other poems. And those poems completed what's called the Trojan Cycle, and begin from the marriage of Achilles' parents, where the golden apple of discord is thrown among the guests, it says, to the fairest, which leads to the judgment of Paris, where he has the 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. And Paris, who is a Trojan, it goes to Mount Ida and chooses Aphrodite as the fairest. Well, that's the beginning of a lot of problems. The other 2 goddesses don't like it. And at the same time, and it's that the favor of Aphrodite for Paris is what allows Paris then years later to steal Helen away from the Greek king Menelaus and take her to Troy. But when when the Greek princes courted Helen, they all agreed that if she was taken from her, whoever she chose as her husband, all the 100 princes would gather together and go to bring her back. Now, they didn't think of someone from another place stealing her. They were thinking she would be stolen by one of them. But in any case, this vow was an obligation that they had to then go to Troy and bring her back. And Odysseus tried to escape having to go. He really didn't want to go. And he feigned insanity. And there was another Greek who was kind of crafty like Odysseus named Palamedes. And Palamedes took the young baby Telemachus and went to where Odysseus was plowing salt into the fields and put the baby down in front of the plow. And had Odysseus really been crazy, he would have just plowed the baby into the earth.
Oh my God.
But he wasn't really crazy, and he stopped. And at that point, they said, "You have to go to Troy." And he said, "Well, let me go on a mission of peace." So he went and tried to negotiate the return of Helen. And being unable to do that, ended up taking the Ithacans in their 12 ships to the siege of the city of Troy. So he was gone 10 years during the siege, and then 10 years on his return journey, trying to get back to Ithaca.
So you had a very specific inspiration for this. Did you ever, before you had this dream, did you ever think that you were going to write a novel like this, or targeting this kind of subject matter?
Not really. And the dream was a huge energizing piece of the coming to the novel. And then as I went, I think in a way that I was primed, and the dream showed that priming of the psyche to explore the father-son relationship, the issue of absence, the issue of return, and the complexity of it all. So that it was really something new for me. It came out of the unconscious, as you would say, and then galvanized me to discover new things and put things together.
I think that's so very, very cool, that just that story about how you had this inspiration, because it's not like you sat down and you had a conversation. Oh, what should I write about? Well, this is pretty interesting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's do it. Like, this was like a dream. It's almost like a movie sequence where you had this dream and you woke up with this like kind of epiphany and inspiration, and then you research, and you I'm sure you're a very well read on the whole, subject of Greek mythology and Greek stories. So that's really impressive. That's really cool. I think that's a fascinating story of how this came about.
The dream was really a leading in to Greek mythology, to the larger Greek mythology, to the larger myth of the Trojan Cycle, and particularly to the Iliad and the Odyssey.
So, okay, so the book, if we could see, I have a fake background, so I want to make sure it's shown. On Wine Dark Seas. So I think, I mean, amazing reviews, amazing description. Can you, if you would be so kind, can you read something for us?
Well, I'd love to. I'd like to read a short passage that is the voice of Telemachus.
Sure.
And then maybe later in the podcast, a brief passage with the voice of Odysseus speaking to Telemachus.
Absolutely. Sure. Yes.
So this is actually the opening of the book. It's chapter 1.
Okay.
Phemios, I have lived my life enduring a hatred and odium that few men suffer. On this stony and barren island to which my father returned from the embraces of divine women and the underworld itself, I have since manhood known nothing but the evil eye, the muttered calumny, and a sullen obedience that slaves might offer in fear of the overseer's fists. Innumerable times I wish I had followed you on the boundless oceans of the world. I might have traveled to Egypt, where Menelaus himself spent 7 years as a merchant on his long return with Helen from Troy. But I would no more abandon Ithaca than leave a child whom I love. My famed father, godlike Odysseus, cared little for the odium he and I would suffer for slaying my mother's suitors. And Phemios, I should say, is the bard, the singer of songs, whom the suitors forced to stay with them and sing for them.
What you just read had such a nice flow, such nice language. Is this the way that you write, or is this very much going in, in the mode of a story such as this? Something like kind of spinning off of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and you kind of keep that tone consciously, or is that just how you write? Because it really does match.
I would say that this is not how I would usually write, and that this came from what should we say, the archetypal power of the myth somehow became alive in me and moved me to write this way.
So that's what I was assuming. I didn't want to, assume without asking you, but that's what I was assuming. And I think that is even more impressive because you kind of are morphing into this person who speaks the way that they did. And, everybody who's educated on these subjects kind of will know that if you're reading some modern novel that you pick up at the airport bookstore, or you pick up the Iliad, there's very much a big difference in the way it's laid out, the way it flows, the tone, everything. And just from that brief paragraph chapter that you read to us, I really felt in that kind of frame of mind and in that thought process. I think that's really impressive.
It was very interesting experience to write this because I wrote an essay which is at the end of the novel about the process of writing it. And when I write, I like to sleep on things and then I think I get new energy to go forward, but I am thinking about what I'm going to write. But at one point in the book, I came to the book with 350 words that seemed to exist already. And simply like taking dictation, I just wrote them down.
So, I mean, would you say that this was something that was just like, if you believe in fate, like it's something that was just like inside you, meant to come out, maybe?
Well, I think that because of my strong feelings about my father's absence, it resonated with me in a way that was very powerful and allowed a kind of what you'd call channeling. So it feels channeled.
Wow. Now, let me ask you this. Well, I was gonna. Is your dad still alive?
So no, my dad passed away about 10 years ago.
Okay. I was just curious as to like any thoughts that he may have had with this novel.
Well, he admired the novel. Of course, at that point, you, we had become closer,
Oh,
and
good.
that was good, because it was quite that to a child of 7 to be separated from your father is quite an extraordinary thing, and we worked to overcome some of that separation.
I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I'm glad that he actually had the opportunity to know that this was happening before he passed. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, that's great. So fast forward a little bit. Is this do you have any plans for additional stuff in this kind of series, or just in this genre?
So I've been thinking lately, what exactly would I like to focus on or move toward? And what I've concluded is it's mythology. I wrote a book called The Secret Life of Money, which is nonfiction, but it's filled with myths and folk tales. And it tries to get underneath money, which goes from hand to hand so easily, and understand what does it mean within us, in our psyches. What is it telling us about ourselves and the world around us? And these myths and folk tales help to understand. And this book, although a novel and very, very different from The Secret Life of Money, is also using mythology in a way that reveals who I am, at least, and maybe who we are. So I would like to move forward with that, and I would like to work more with myths and folk tales and continue in this direction.
I was gonna say, I really hope your answer was that you are gonna do more, because, like I said, maybe it's just me. I don't know how other people think. Foti, you could chime in, but the fact that you could get into that mindset and into that, like, just the words, the words flowed so nicely, and there was, that kind of poetic flow to it. And for me, that's extremely difficult thing to do. I mean, I've tried school, college, whatever. I've tried, I've done a little bit, but it's just way too hard for me. And when I hear it, it's really, really, it's impressive to me. And you're not Greek in your history, in your ethnicity, right?
No, but I have been to Greece, and I have a very strong feeling of connection to Greece, in part because of this novel.
I'm gonna say, if you dive in deep enough, you'll probably have some sort of roots somewhere over there.
I'm sure.
Everybody. But
Because there's a lot of people who say that that we've actually had on the show and interviewed, and they said, I don't know what it is, I don't understand it, but when the second we landed in Greece and got off the plane, it felt like this weird sensation of like I'm home, or I'm connected, or this something, a place I should be. And you said that yourself, so I'm telling you, somewhere in your history, you have to have some sort of connection.
I had a wonderful experience of going to Crete for a conference on mythology. And then after I went to the conference, I went back through Athens to Patras and took the ferry to Ithaca. So I was on the wine dark seas. And it was, when you've been writing like this, it's just quite exhilarating to then experience something like that.
That's amazing.
I mean,
Oh my
Ari,
God.
I was just gonna mention Tad to Ari. I mean, even though we're discussing stories of mythological essence, how connecting is it to today's situations in our lives, or most people's lives? Then people always try to understand the meaning of their situations in life, and these stories really resonate, use that word earlier, and connect with explaining certain situations along our journeys. It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
And even
Yes.
even though the term, they're myths, right? But they're really actually explaining the meaning of our journeys.
I think that, for example, that this myth of his going to Troy, leaving his son, and then of the Nostoi, the returns from Troy, and all the various things that happened, like Agamemnon being slaughtered in the bath because he had sacrificed Iphigenia. It casts light into so many maybe dark corners of life and our psyches that need illumination. And certainly it was very helpful for me to write this book and see the relationship of course, being curious about what the relationship would be. I mean, after Odysseus comes back, the first thing he says to his son is, let's kill all the suitors. And the suitors, maybe Telemachus didn't like them very much, but I mean, they were people he had associated with, and they were the people who lived on the island, and they were of a certain age. And suddenly he and his father are complicit with the help of two other of their servants in killing these 100 people. There's going to be consequences of that. And so I think there's quite a lot to be learned.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I think we need to read more mythology to understand. That's what I believe.
Would you like me to read a brief passage from Odysseus?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, so here is Odysseus speaking to his son Telemachus as they try to navigate coming together after this. It actually happened to my father. My grandfather went to World War I, came home when my father was 3. My father didn't know who he was. And you can imagine, this is a baby in his mother's arms, and his father's gone for 20 years. This is a total stranger coming back.
Wow.
So this is what Odysseus says, one of the many things he says to Telemachus. Many nights I longed to lie beside your mother in our bed. Often I called myself the father of Telemachus, and longed to touch the only boy I would father with my beloved Penelope. I cared far more for my son and his sons than for my father and his fathers. Who can live the past again? But you could be the possibility of me. My valor and shame at Troy would always be mine. I would never become a youth. But had I fathered another who might learn from my life and be a better man, I dreamt that for you, battling on the Trojan plains and weeping by the sterile sea on the island of immortal Calypso.
Wow. I love that flow. It's almost like this was written 2,000 years ago and you're just reading it to us now.
Yeah. And then, of course, some of the more marvelous parts of it for me, I mean, if you think about the Odyssey, we don't really know whether anything Odysseus says about his return voyage is true or not, because he came back alone. None of the men who accompanied him to Troy survived the return journey. And therefore, you don't know if Polyphemus was a real giant with one eye or some sort of monster of the psyche. And I don't know, you can list all of those terrible ordeals that occurred. And then also he, in 2 cases, makes up stories that he tells to people to be protective of himself. And in both of them, he's the son of the king of Crete. So in the book, I make up a story where he's, again, the son of the king of Crete, and goes off to the Trojan War, but has a totally different outcome from what happened in the Iliad. So yeah, there's just so much there, and it's rich in many, many different psychological ways.
Absolutely. So we're going to put this into the notes, but just for our audience's sake, that if they're listening or watching, where can they learn more about you and the book, and where can they buy the book?
So the book can be purchased on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I have a website, which is tadcrawford.com. So there's quite a bit more about me, and certainly on Wine Dark Seas, but also the other things that I've written: The Secret Life of Money, Legal Guide for the Visual Artist. So those would be the two places I would suggest going.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I definitely suggest to our audience to check this out. I mean, like I said, we have a pretty targeted audience. This hits home for a lot of us, I believe. And when we first received the book, and I'm reading through, and now with you as the author and reading excerpts, I mean, it really is a beautiful story. It really is wonderfully told, wonderfully written. And I 100% recommend it to everybody watching and listening, because I don't think you're going to regret reading this.
Thank you so much, Ari.
Thank you, Tad. Thank you for your interest in this genre. Thank you for writing such a wonderful book, and wonderfully written. And thank you for your time to be with us. It's a real treat for Foti and I when we have, we have people from all walks of life, but somehow it's that, people like you who have like a certain intellect and write and do these types of things that really kind of feel good when we talk to you and interview you, because it just makes, we do everything Greek. Everything's Greek in what we do. And yeah, especially for a non-Greek person to embrace it and to do it so well, it's a treat for us. We love it.
We like to.
Well, I would be happy to come back and chat some more about the larger Trojan cycle and what, for example, everybody knows the story of the Trojan horse, but that's not in the Iliad or the Odyssey. Mm-hmm. There's really quite a lot here. So I thank you both again.
Absolutely. And having said that, we definitely would love to have you on a future episode to discuss what you just mentioned. And I'm going to say to Ari, I view Tad as a Philhellene, not a non-Greek.
Yes, that's what I.
Thank you.
That's a proper term.
And I just wanted to also add, it was an honor to have you on our show, Tad. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and also to let our audience listen to you, because it's fascinating how these readings can actually connect with anyone that's listening about life and their journeys. I think it's super important that we made that connection. So thank you so much. And as we said, this will not be the last time.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you, Tad. Thank you, Foti. Thanks, everybody out there, for watching and listening. Please check the notes or go to Tad's website, tadcrawford.com. Buy the books. I mean, you're not going to regret it. We loved it. You will love it. Thank you, Tad, again. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you so much for watching and listening.